Have you ever been told you're not good enough? That your dreams are too small? For Clara, these weren't just words. They were the final, cutting remarks from her ex-husband, Preston, a man who equated self-worth with net worth. He left her for a life of luxury, mocking her modest existence. But what happens when the quiet life you've built, the one he scorned, attracts the attention of someone who can buy and sell Preston's entire world? This is a story about how the universe has a funny way of balancing the scales, proving that true wealth isn't about what you have, but who you are. Before we get started, drop your city in the comments. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching from across the globe. Let's jump in. Clara traced the rim of a ceramic mug, its earthy texture a familiar comfort in her hands. The morning sun, a soft, buttery yellow, spilled into her small but meticulously kept apartment in Austin, Texas. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, each a tiny, glittering reminder of the quiet world she had built for herself. This was her sanctuary, a place of peace far removed from the gilded cage she had once called home. Her ex-husband, Preston Thorne, would have called it quaint, or more likely, pitiful. Preston, a man whose ambition was as vast and unforgiving as a desert, had always seen life as a ladder. You were either climbing or you were falling. There was no in-between, no standing still to appreciate the view. For 10 years, Clara had tried to keep pace with his relentless ascent, hosting lavish dinner parties, smiling graciously at his condescending business partners, and slowly, piece by piece, sanding down the edges of her own personality until she was as smooth and polished as the marble countertops in their multi-million-dollar mansion. The end had been as swift as it was brutal. "I need a partner, Clara, not a passenger," he had said, his voice devoid of the warmth she once cherished. He was leaving her for Sloane, a woman who was his equal in every way that mattered to him. Ruthless, impeccably connected, and with a portfolio that could rival a small nation's GDP. Clara, with her love for pottery, her volunteer work at the local animal shelter, and her dream of opening a small bookstore cafe, was, in his eyes, an anchor. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago, but the echoes of his final words still haunted her. "Enjoy your modest little life, Clara. I'm sure you'll be very comfortable." The sneer in his voice had been the final twist of the knife. But Clara had done more than become comfortable. She had become herself again. She had taken her share of the settlement, a sum that felt astronomical to her, but was a mere pittance to Preston, and invested it wisely. Not in stocks or bonds, but in her own well-being. She'd found this apartment, filled it with plants and second-hand books, and enrolled in a pottery class, the one she'd always dreamed of. Her hands, once adorned with diamonds, were now perpetually dusted with clay, and she had never been happier. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her reverie. It was a text from her best friend, Maya. "Maya, you will not believe who I just saw at the Four Seasons. Your ex-demon and his plastic bride. They look like they're negotiating a hostile takeover of the brunch menu." Clara chuckled. Maya's descriptions were always so vivid. "Clara, let me guess, he's wearing that ridiculously expensive watch he bought after closing the Henderson deal?" "Maya, the very same. And she's wearing a dress that costs more than my car. They're holding court, Clara. It's disgusting." Clara felt a familiar pang, not of jealousy, but of a weary sadness. She had once been a part of that world, a world where your value was measured by the labels you wore and the company you kept. She was glad to be free of it, but sometimes the ghost of that life lingered. "Clara, well, I'm about to go play with mud, so I think I'm winning." "Maya, damn right you are. Hey, are we still on for tonight?" Clara smiled. Tonight was their weekly ritual: cheap wine, pizza, and a movie marathon. It was simple, uncomplicated, and utterly perfect. "Clara, Absolutely. My turn to pick the movie. I'm thinking something with subtitles. Maya, you're a monster. See you at 7. Clara set her phone down and took a sip of her coffee. The bitterness of the brew was a pleasant contrast to the sweetness of the morning. She was about to head to the community pottery studio she shared with a few other local artists when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. Unknown. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Hello? Clara Thorne? The voice was deep, smooth, and unfamiliar. It's Clara Hayes now, she corrected, the words tasting of freedom. Who is this? My name is Ethan Davenport. I'm calling about your pottery. Clara's brow furrowed. My pottery? Yes. I saw some of your pieces at the East Austin studio tour last month. The vases, specifically. The ones with the blue crystalline glaze. Clara's heart did a little flutter. The blue crystalline glaze was her signature, a difficult and often unpredictable technique that she had spent months perfecting. Oh, yes, I remember those. I was wondering if you take commissions. This was a first. She had sold a few pieces here and there. But a commission? That felt professional. I do. What did you have in mind? I'm the curator for a new hotel opening downtown, the Ethel. We're looking for unique, locally sourced art to feature in our penthouse suites. Your work is exactly the kind of aesthetic we're aiming for. It's grounded, authentic. It has a soul. Soul. The word resonated with her. Preston had always called her pottery a messy hobby. I'd be honored to be considered, she said, her voice a little shaky. Excellent. Would you be available to meet this week? I'd love to discuss the project in more detail. They set a meeting for the following day. When Clara hung up, she felt a dizzying sense of validation. It wasn't about the money, though that would certainly be a bonus. It was about being seen. Really seen. The next day, she met Ethan at a coffee shop. He was even more charming in person, with kind eyes and a smile that seemed to reach them. He spoke about art with a passion that she found infectious, and when he talked about her work, he used words like nuance and emotional resonance. For the first time in a long time, she felt like an artist, not just a woman who played with clay. The commission was for 10 large vases, a significant undertaking that would keep her busy for weeks. She left the meeting feeling energized, inspired, and for the first time in a long time, hopeful about her future. That evening, as she and Maya were halfway through a bottle of Pinot Grigio and a heated debate about the merits of 1980s action movies, Clara's phone rang. It was Preston. Her blood ran cold. He never called. They communicated exclusively through their lawyers, a sterile and blessedly infrequent exchange. What do you want, Preston? She answered, her voice sharper than she intended. Clara, darling, he began, his tone oozing a synthetic charm that made her skin crawl. I was just thinking about you. How are you? Still enjoying your simple life? I'm fine, Preston. What do you want? I heard you were at the Four Seasons for brunch, he said, and she could almost hear the smirk in his voice. Trying to relive the glory days? Clara rolled her eyes. Of course, someone had seen her and reported back to him. His network of informants was as extensive as it was pathetic. I was meeting a client, she said. The word client, tasting like a small victory. Preston laughed, a short, barking sound. A client? Don't tell me you're still selling those little pots and pans of yours. I always thought that was more of a charity case. The insult, so casually delivered, still had the power to wound. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of her conversation with Ethan. It's a commission, actually, for the new Ethel Hotel. There was a pause on the other end of the line. She had surprised him. Good. The Ethel? He said, his voice a little tighter now. That's a pretty high-end establishment. Who did you meet with? Ethan Davenport, the curator. Another pause. This one longer. Ethan Davenport, he repeated, the name sounding foreign in his mouth. Never heard of him. Well, he's heard of me, she said, a new and unfamiliar confidence blooming in her chest. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a life to get back to. My real life. The one I chose. She hung up before he could respond, her heart pounding. Maya was looking at her, her eyes wide. Damn, girl, that was a mic drop moment. Clara couldn't help but smile. It felt good. As it should, Maya said, raising her glass. To the Ethel Hotel, and to clients with excellent taste. Clara clinked her glass against Maya's. To clients with excellent taste, she repeated, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the wine. The next few weeks were a blur of creative energy. Clara spent every spare moment in the studio, her hands shaping the clay, her mind focused on the 10 vases that represented so much more than just a commission. They were a testament to her resilience, a symbol of her new life. She and Ethan met several times to discuss the project, their conversations often straying from pottery to art, music, and life. She learned that he had grown up in a small town in West Texas, that he had a passion for discovering new artists, and that he had a quiet strength that she found herself increasingly drawn to. One evening, after a particularly productive day at the studio, he invited her to dinner. It wasn't a business meeting, he had clarified, but a date. Clara had been hesitant at first, the thought of dating still a foreign and slightly terrifying concept. But there was something about Ethan, a gentleness and a genuine curiosity, that made her say yes. The date was easy. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as effortlessly as the wine. He didn't talk about his portfolio or his assets. He talked about his dreams, his fears, his love for the rugged beauty of the Texas landscape. He listened to her, really listened, his eyes never leaving hers. When he dropped her off at her apartment, he didn't try to kiss her. He simply took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. I had a wonderful time, Clara. Me too, she said, and she meant it. As she watched him walk away, she realized that for the first time since her divorce, she wasn't thinking about Preston. She wasn't thinking about what she had lost. She was thinking about what she might have just found. The vases were a triumph. Each one was unique, a swirl of earthy tones and that signature blue crystalline glaze that seemed to capture the light and hold it. When Ethan saw them, he was speechless. Clara, he said, his voice full of awe. They're magnificent. They were installed in the penthouse suites of the Ethel, just in time for the grand opening, a lavish affair that was the talk of the town. Clara, at Ethan's insistence, was on the guest list. She spent a small fortune on a dress, a simple but elegant navy blue gown that made her feel like a queen. As she stood in front of her mirror, she saw not the broken woman Preston had left behind, but a confident, talented artist who was finally coming into her own. The Ethel was a monument to modern luxury, all clean lines and soaring glass walls. The lobby was buzzing with the city's elite, a sea of designer labels and flashing diamonds. It was a world she had once known so well, but now she felt like a tourist. Ethan found her by the bar, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. "You look breathtaking," he said, his voice a low murmur in her ear. She blushed. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. "Come on, there's someone I want you to meet." He led her through the crowd, his hand a warm and steady presence on the small of her back. They stopped in front of a small group of people, at the center of which stood a man with a familiar, predatory smile. Preston. Clara's heart stopped. Of course, he was here. An event of this magnitude was like a homing beacon for him. He was with Sloane, who looked as if she had been carved from ice, her beauty as cold as it was perfect. Preston's eyes widened in surprise when he saw her, his gaze flicking from her face to her hand, so securely held in Ethan's. "Clara," he said, recovering quickly. "What a surprise. I didn't realize you were on the guest list." The implication was clear. You don't belong here. "Preston," she said, her voice steady. "Sloane, You remember my ex-husband." Ethan's grip on her hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure," he said, his voice polite but with an undercurrent of steel. "Preston Thorne," Preston said, extending a hand. "Thorne Capital." Ethan shook his hand, his smile never wavering. "Ethan Davenport." Preston's eyes narrowed. "Davenport?" he repeated. "Any relation to Harrison Davenport?" "He's my father," Ethan said simply. Clara felt a jolt. Harrison Davenport was a name that even she, in her self-imposed exile from the world of high finance, recognized. He was a legend, a reclusive billionaire who had built a global empire from the ground up. Preston's jaw went slack. The change in his demeanor was instantaneous and almost comical. The condescending smirk was gone, replaced by a look of fawning sycophancy. "Mr. Davenport?" he stammered. I had no idea. It's an honor." "Please call me Ethan," he said, his tone still mild, but his eyes were fixed on Preston, a silent and unreadable message passing between them. Sloane, ever the opportunist, swooped in. "We're such admirers of your father's work," she gushed, her voice a syrupy, sweet confection. "The Davenport Foundation has done so much for the arts." "Indeed," Preston added, nodding eagerly. "We were just saying how we need more people like your father, people with real vision." Clara felt a surge of nausea. The hypocrisy was so thick she could taste it. These were the same people who had mocked her hobby, who had dismissed her art as worthless. Ethan, to his credit, seemed unimpressed. "My father believes in supporting authentic talent," he said, his gaze shifting to Clara, a warmth in his eyes that was meant only for her. "Which is why we're so thrilled to have Clara's work featured in our hotel." Preston's head snapped back to Clara, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. Your work?" "Yes," Ethan said, his smile widening. "Her vases are in every one of our penthouse suites. They're the centerpiece of our collection. In fact, I was just telling my father that Clara is one of the most exciting artists I've discovered in years." The color drained from Preston's face. He looked at Clara, really looked at her, as if for the first time, he saw not the modest ex-wife he had so carelessly discarded, but a woman standing beside the son of one of the most powerful men in the world. A woman whose art was being celebrated in the most exclusive hotel in the city. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. Sloane looked as if she had swallowed a lemon. It was Clara who finally broke it. "It's been lovely seeing you both," she said, her voice clear and strong. "But if you'll excuse us, Ethan was just about to give me a tour of the penthouse." She turned, and with Ethan's hand still firmly in hers, she walked away, leaving Preston and Sloane standing in her wake, their world suddenly, irrevocably, tilted on its axis. As they rode the private elevator to the penthouse, the silence was broken only by the soft hum of the machinery. Clara's mind was racing, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. "You didn't tell me your father was Harrison Davenport," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Would it have made a difference?" I don't know," she admitted. "It's just a lot to take in." "I know," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm sorry, I should have told you." "Why didn't you?" "Because I wanted you to see me," he said, his gaze intense. "Ethan, not Ethan Davenport, son of a billionaire. Just Ethan, the guy who loves your pottery." The elevator doors opened, revealing a suite that was the epitome of luxury. But Clara barely noticed the floor-to-ceiling windows, the designer furniture, the breathtaking view of the city skyline. Her eyes were fixed on the vase that sat on a pedestal in the center of the room. Her vase, its blue crystalline glaze shimmering in the soft light. "I see you, Ethan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I see you." He stepped closer, his hands coming up to cup her face. "And I see you, Clara, the most incredible woman I've ever met." And then he kissed her. A kiss that was full of all the words they hadn't said. a kiss that tasted of new beginnings and second chances. In that moment, surrounded by the trappings of a world she had once thought she wanted, Clara realized that true wealth had nothing to do with money or status. It was about connection. It was about authenticity. It was about finding someone who saw the masterpiece in your messy, beautiful, perfectly imperfect life. And as she kissed him back, the echoes of her past life finally, blessedly, faded into silence. The weeks following the Ethel's grand opening were a surreal dream. Clara's name, once relegated to the society pages as an accessory to Preston Thorne, was now being whispered in the art galleries and cultural circles of Austin. The story of the unknown potter, discovered by the enigmatic son of Harrison Davenport, was a compelling narrative, and the city's media, always hungry for a Cinderella story, devoured it. Her small online shop, once a trickle of sales to friends and local enthusiasts, was now flooded with orders. Inquiries for commissions came from as far away as New York and San Francisco. She had to start a waiting list, a concept that was both thrilling and terrifying. The community studio, once her quiet refuge, now felt too small, too public. She found herself longing for a space of her own, a place where her burgeoning career could take root and grow. Ethan was her anchor in this whirlwind. He was unfailingly supportive, celebrating her successes with a quiet pride that felt more genuine than any applause. He was also fiercely protective, acting as a buffer between her and the more aggressive reporters and gallery owners who now vied for her attention. He understood her need for solitude, for the quiet moments with her hands in the clay. And he made sure she had them. Their relationship deepened, evolving from the tentative early stages into a comfortable, intimate partnership. They spent their evenings cooking together in her small apartment, their weekends exploring the hill country, and their nights tangled in each other's arms. With him, she felt safe, cherished, and for the first time truly loved for who she was. Not who he wanted her to be, but the shadow of her past was long. One afternoon, while she was sketching designs for a new collection, a sleek black car pulled up in front of her apartment building. A man in a tailored suit got out and approached her door. He was carrying a large, ornate floral arrangement. "Clara Hayes?" he asked when she answered. "Yes? This is for you." He handed her the bouquet, a riot of exotic flowers that must have cost a fortune. There was a small card tucked among the blooms. She thanked the driver and brought the flowers inside, her heart pounding with a strange sense of dread. The card was thick, expensive cardstock, and the handwriting was achingly familiar. "Clara, I was wrong about everything. I'd like to see you, to talk. Preston." She stared at the card, the words blurring before her eyes. A wave of anger, hot and sharp, washed over her. How dare he? After all this time, after the humiliation, the casual cruelty, how dare he think he could just waltz back into her life with a bouquet of expensive flowers? She was about to throw the card in the trash when her phone rang. It was Maya. "Did you get the flowers?" she asked, her voice tight. "You knew about this." "He called me, Clara, begged me for your address, said he was a changed man, that he had made a terrible mistake. I told him to go to hell, but he was persistent." "He's always persistent," Clara said, the words tasting like ash. "It's how he gets what he wants." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to throw these ridiculously overpriced flowers in the dumpster, and I'm going to block his number." "Good," Maya said, her relief palpable. "He doesn't deserve a second of your time." But it wasn't that easy. Preston, true to form, was relentless. He sent more gifts. A case of her favorite champagne, a first edition of a novel she had once mentioned she loved, a ridiculously expensive piece of jewelry that she promptly sent back. He left long, rambling voicemails, his voice thick with a remorse that sounded almost real. He talked about how empty his life felt, how Sloane was more of a business partner than a wife, how he saw Clara's vases every time he had a meeting at the Ethel, and was reminded of what he had thrown away. He was a man unraveling. And a small, traitorous part of her felt a flicker of pity. She mentioned it to Ethan one evening, her voice hesitant. "He sounds broken." Ethan, who had been listening patiently, his expression unreadable, took her hand. "People like Preston don't break, Clara. They bend. They adapt. He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry for what he lost. Not you, but the access you now represent." His words were a splash of cold water, and she knew he was right. Preston wasn't mourning the loss of their love. He was mourning the loss of his proximity to power. He had seen her with Ethan, had connected the dots to Harrison Davenport, and now he wanted back in. The final straw came a week later. Clara was at the studio, a new, larger space she had just leased in a converted warehouse district. It was her sanctuary, a place of light and air and creative possibility. She was unloading a kiln, her hands covered in a fine layer of ash, when the door opened and he walked in. "Preston!" He looked smaller somehow, less imposing than she remembered. The expensive suit seemed to hang off his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Clara," he said, his voice soft. "What are you doing here, Preston? How did you find me?" "It wasn't hard," he said with a ghost of his old smirk. "You're a local celebrity now." She straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron. "You need to leave." "Please," he said, taking a step closer. "Just 5 minutes, that's all I ask." She hesitated, her resolve wavering. She had played this scene in her mind 100 times, and in every version, she was strong, defiant, untouchable. But seeing him here, in her space, a place that was so intimately hers, she felt a tremor of the old fear, the old insecurity. "Fine," she said, her voice clipped. 5 minutes. He launched into a well-rehearsed speech, a litany of regrets and apologies that sounded as if they had been crafted by a team of public relations experts. He talked about the pressure he had been under, the mistakes he had made, the superficial world he had been trapped in. "I see that now," he said, his eyes pleading. "You were the only real thing in my life, Clara. I was a fool to let you go." She listened, her expression a mask of neutrality. When he was finished, she simply said, "Are you done?" He looked taken aback. Yes." "Good," she said, her voice cold as ice. "Now let me tell you what I see. I see a man who didn't value me until someone else did. I see a man who mocked my dreams until he realized they could be profitable. I see a man who is not in love with me, but with the idea of me, with the proximity to a world he so desperately wants to be a part of." She took a step closer, her eyes blazing. "You didn't come here to win me back, Preston. You came here to network. You saw me with Ethan Davenport, and you saw an opportunity. That's all I've ever been to you, isn't it? An opportunity, a stepping stone, an asset." He flinched, the truth of her words hitting him like a physical blow. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" she challenged. "You left me because I was modest, because I wasn't ambitious enough for you. But now that my modest life has the attention of a billionaire, suddenly I'm the one that got away. You're not sorry, Preston. You're just a bad investment banker who miscalculated my value." The color drained from his face. He looked, for the first time, truly defeated. "Now get out of my studio," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "And don't ever contact me again." He stared at her for a long moment, his expression a mixture of shock, anger, and something that looked almost like respect. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. As the door closed behind him, Clara let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her legs felt weak, and she sank onto a nearby stool, her body trembling. But through the fear, through the anger, there was a surge of triumph. She had faced her dragon, and she had won. That evening, when she told Ethan what had happened, he simply held her, letting her cry out all the years of hurt and frustration. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered into her hair. I was so scared, she admitted. I know, he said. But you did it. You set yourself free. And she had. The final lingering chain to her past had been broken. She was no longer Clara Thorne, the discarded wife. She was Clara Hayes, the artist. And her future was a blank canvas, waiting to be filled. A few weeks later, Ethan came to her studio with a bottle of champagne and a mysterious smile. What are we celebrating? She asked, wiping a smudge of clay from her cheek. I have a surprise for you, he said, his eyes sparkling. 2, actually. He handed her a thick envelope. Inside was a plane ticket to Florence, Italy, and a brochure for a masterclass in ceramic restoration at a prestigious art institute. Ethan, she breathed, her eyes wide. I don't know what to say. Say you'll go, he said. You've been working so hard, building your business, dealing with distractions. You deserve a break, a chance to just be an artist, to learn and be inspired. Tears welled in her eyes. It was the most thoughtful gift she had ever received. Thank you, she whispered. That's not all, he said, his smile widening. He pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. The headline read, Thorne Capital under investigation for fraud. Clara gasped. The article detailed a complex web of shell corporations, insider trading, and embezzlement. Preston's empire, the one he had built on the ashes of their marriage, was crumbling. What happened? Let's just say, Ethan said, his expression carefully neutral, that when you mess with the people I care about, you attract a certain level of scrutiny. My father has a very long reach and a very low tolerance for bullies. Clara stared at him, a dawning understanding in her eyes. He hadn't just protected her. He had avenged her. It was a gesture of such fierce, unwavering loyalty that it took her breath away. You did this for me? I did this, he corrected gently. For us. No one gets to hurt you, Clara, not anymore. He popped the cork on the champagne, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged space. To Florence, he said, handing her a glass. And to new beginnings. She clinked her glass against his, her heart full to bursting. To new beginnings, she repeated, her voice full of a joy so profound it felt like a prayer. As the bubbles danced on her tongue, she looked around her studio, at the bags of clay, the shelves of glazes, the kiln that glowed with the promise of creation. This was her world, the one she had built with her own 2 hands. It was real, it was authentic, and it was hers. And for the first time, she understood that her modest life was anything but. It was a masterpiece in the making. The trip to Florence was a revelation. Immersed in the art and history of the city, Clara felt a creative awakening unlike anything she had ever experienced. She spent her days in the cool, quiet halls of the Restoration Institute, her hands carefully mending the broken pottery of centuries past. It was a slow, meditative process, a conversation with the artists who had come before her. She was not just fixing their work. She was honoring their legacy. In the evenings, she and Ethan would wander the cobblestone streets, getting lost in the labyrinthine alleyways, discovering hidden trattorias and tiny artisan shops. They ate gelato by the Arno, watched the sunset from the Piazzale Michelangelo, and talked for hours about art, life, and the future. It was in Florence that Ethan told her the full story of his family. He spoke of the immense pressure of being Harrison Davenport's son, the constant struggle to forge his own identity in the shadow of his father's legend. He confessed that his passion for art was, in part, a rebellion, a way to carve out a space for himself that had nothing to do with finance or power. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, Ethan said one evening, as they sat on the steps of the Duomo, the magnificent cathedral glowing in the twilight. He saw my love for art as a weakness, a distraction. It took me a long time to convince him that it was my strength. He sees it now, Clara said, her hand finding his in the darkness. He must. The easel is a testament to that. Ethan smiled, a sad, wistful expression on his face. He sees the success, the return on investment. but I'm not sure he'll ever truly understand the why. In that moment, Clara saw the vulnerability beneath his quiet confidence. He was not just a billionaire's son. He was a man searching for his father's approval, a man trying to bridge the gap between two very different worlds. And she, in her own way, understood that struggle. When they returned to Austin, Clara was a changed woman. The last vestiges of her insecurity had been stripped away, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence in her own talent and her own worth. She threw herself into her work, her new collection inspired by the colors and textures of Florence. Her pieces were bolder, more ambitious, and infused with a depth and maturity that reflected her own personal growth. The news of Preston's downfall had sent shockwaves through the city's business community. Thorne Capital had imploded, taking with it the fortunes of many of Austin's elite. Preston, facing a mountain of legal battles and a flock of angry investors, had disappeared from the social scene. Sloane, in a move that surprised no one, had filed for divorce, her loyalty as fleeting as her husband's fortune. Clara felt a strange sense of detachment from it all. It was as if she were watching a movie about someone else's life. The man who had once held so much power over her was now a cautionary tale, a ghost from a past that no longer felt like her own. One afternoon, Ethan called her, his voice tight with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "Can you meet me? There's something I need to show you." He gave her an address in a part of town she didn't recognize, a quiet, tree-lined street of stately old homes. When she pulled up, she saw him standing on the sidewalk in front of a magnificent, sprawling mansion, a beautiful but neglected relic from a bygone era. "What is this place?" she asked, her eyes taking in the peeling paint, the overgrown gardens, the faded grandeur of the house. "This," Ethan said, his voice full of a strange reverence, "is where I grew up." Clara was stunned. She had always imagined him growing up in a sleek, modern penthouse. Not this place that felt so full of history, of memories. "My father sold it after my mother died," he said, his gaze fixed on the house. "He said it held too many ghosts, but I always loved it. It was the one place where he wasn't Harrison Davenport, the titan of industry. He was just my dad." He took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. "He's selling it again." "He bought it back?" "No," Ethan said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I did." Clara's heart did a little flip. "You bought this house?" "We bought this house," he corrected gently. "If you'll have it." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and got down on one knee. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Clara Hayes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the most incredible, talented, and resilient woman I have ever known. You have taught me what it means to be true to yourself, to find the beauty in the broken pieces, to build a life of authenticity and purpose. I don't want to be Ethan Davenport, son of a billionaire, anymore. I just want to be Ethan, the man who loves you. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to speak. He slipped the ring on her finger, a simple, elegant band with a single perfect diamond that seemed to capture all the light in the world. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, held in the newly restored gardens of their new home. Maya was her maid of honor, and Ethan's father, Harrison, was his best man. Harrison Davenport was an imposing figure, a man who radiated power and authority. But when he spoke to Clara, his eyes were surprisingly kind. "He's a good man," he said, his gaze softening as he looked at his son. "You've made him happy." "He's made me happy too," Clara said, her heart full. "I know," Harrison said, a hint of a smile on his face. "I've seen your work. You have a rare talent. It's authentic." The word coming from him was the highest praise. A few months after the wedding, as Clara was setting up her new studio in a sun-drenched wing of the house, she received a letter. It was from Preston. Her first instinct was to throw it away. but a strange curiosity made her open it. The letter was short, written on cheap, plain paper. Clara, I heard you got married. I hope you're happy. I'm in a new line of work now. I'm teaching a business class at the community college. It's not much, but it's a start. It's modest. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for the money, or the house, or any of the things I lost. I'm sorry for not seeing you, for not appreciating the woman you were and the woman you've become. You were right. I was a bad investment banker. I miscalculated your value. You are, and always have been, priceless. Preston. Clara read the letter twice. A wave of complex emotions washing over her. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet sense of closure. He had finally understood, not because of who she was with, but because of who he had become. She folded the letter and put it away. It was a relic from a past life, a reminder of how far she had come. That evening, as she and Ethan sat on the porch of their beautiful new home, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had a husband who loved her, a career that fulfilled her, and a life that was rich and full and authentically her own. She thought about the twists and turns her life had taken, the unexpected detours, the painful endings, the beautiful new beginnings. She had learned that resilience wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about finding the strength to put the pieces back together again. She had learned that connection wasn't about finding someone to complete you, but someone who celebrated your incompleteness. And she had learned that authenticity wasn't about being perfect, but about being true to the messy, beautiful, perfectly imperfect masterpiece of you. Ethan's arm tightened around her, and she leaned her head on his shoulder, her heart full of a quiet, unshakable joy. The echoes of her past had finally faded, replaced by the sweet, sweet music of her future. And it was a future she couldn't wait to create. One brushstroke, one handful of clay, one beautiful, authentic day at a time. And there you have it. Clara's journey from a life of quiet desperation to one of triumphant self-discovery. It's a powerful reminder that the universe has a way of rewarding those who stay true to themselves, and that the greatest comeback is living a life that is authentically, unapologetically, and beautifully your own. If Clara's story resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or undervalued, please let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story, and don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of resilience, connection, and the incredible power of the human spirit. Thank you for watching.